Good morning. Whoa, good morning, everybody. May I please ask you all to take your seats so we can start?
Good morning. Can we stand for the national anthem, please?
You may all sit down now. Thank you very much. The Honorable Mark Brantley, Premier of Nevis and Minister of Public Utilities and Energy. The Honorable Eric Evelyn, Deputy Premier and Minister of Agriculture et al. The Honorable Spencer Brand, Minister of Works, Water Services, Physical Planning and Environment et al. The Honorable Troy Liebert, Senator with ministerial responsibilities for education et al. The Honorable Merville Janelle Nisbet, Senator with ministerial responsibility for health, gender affairs and social empowerment. Mr. Stedmont Truss, Cabinet Secretary of the Nevis Island Administration and Special Advisor to the Premier. The Honorable Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, Member of the Opposition in the Nevis Island Assembly. Lou Leon Guerrero, Governor of Guam. Albert Bryan Jr., Governor, United States Virgin Islands. Honorable Zavago Jolly, Minister of Tourism, Agriculture and Fisheries, Government of Turks and Caicos Islands. Cranston Buffon, Parliamentary Secretary, Office of the Premier, Government of Montserrat. Honorable Chris Lee, Hawaii State Senator. Representatives of regional organizations. Mr. Wakely Daniel, Permanent Secretary in the Premier's Ministry, other permanent secretaries in the Nevis Island Administration. Other senior civil servants in the Nevis Island Administration. Esteemed partners and sponsors. Distinguished presenters, panelists. Delegates and other specially invited guests. Members of the media, volunteers, good morning. It is my true pleasure to welcome you to the first forum on climate finance for subnational island jurisdictions and overseas territories here in Nevis. This forum is organized by Island Innovation, the government of Curaçao, the Nevis Island Administration, and the cabinet of the Special Envoy for Bonaire, Sint Eustatius and Seba to the United Nations, European Union, and economic development in Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Bianca Peters, and I'm your liaison of the cabinet of the Special Envoy. It is my true pleasure to be your MC today. Together with Kata Magyar, the Director of Impact Programs of Island Innovation. And she's actually sitting there at table number 16. And impact we will create today. Let us guide you through the goals, expected outcomes, and agenda of today. And before we do that, let's dive a little bit deeper into what is the definition of SNIJ. And I'm sure you can all see the screens. So SNIJ are non-sovereign populated island territories that possess some degree of autonomy in a partnership with a metropolitan country. SNIJ have their own identity and culture, which may be distinct from the metropolitan country. Many are islands and archipelagos that, undergoing decolonization, have chosen to keep legal ties with a parent state and not to pursue full independence. James will tell us all about it later during this morning. So, what about the event goals of today? First of all, we will identify barriers and solutions for SNIJ and OTs in accessing climate finance. And we will share successful case studies and best practices. Very important for all of us, of course, to learn from each other. We are also looking into building capacity for climate project development and finance. Establish new partnerships and collaborating networks. And please take also note of the moments, of course, during this session today to really network with each other and learn from each other. And last but not least, develop concrete action plans and recommendations. So, what do we see as the expected outcomes of today? First of all, we will launch the SNIJ Climate Coalition. It is a bold step in closing the global climate action gap. This new coalition empowers subnational island jurisdictions to unite, collaborate, and lead on climate solutions. And, like I already mentioned, during today, we will launch also the Nevis agenda. And we hope that each and every one of you will contribute with us for this Nevis agenda towards the future. The second outcome of today is smarter access to climate finance. What can we do together to really make sure that we connect with the right financial institutes worldwide in order for us to propel and be able to get access to these financing mechanisms that we all need? So, what about the agenda for today? What may you expect from us? First, we will have the opening from the Honorable Premier of Nevis, Mr. Mark Brantley. Then we will have the scene setting. Presentations given by James Elsmore and Eike Krips. We will then move into a high-level roundtable with unlocking climate financing potentials for our islands. Around 11:15, we will leverage on available climate financing opportunities by two presentations that are going to be given today. And then we will go to a break at 11:45. And after that, we are going to work. We are going to have workshop session, actually two, one before the lunch break and one after the lunch break. Around 3:30, we will have another break. And around 3:45, we will be back here in the room with all of us and present to each other what we did during the workshops. And then we will have the closing, the path forward. What may you expect from us towards the future? So without further ado, it is a true pleasure to introduce to you the Premier of NIVIS, Mr. Mark Brandley, to give his keynote speech.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here. Welcome to beautiful Queen City, Nevis. I'm delighted to have all of you here, and I adopt the protocol that has been so ably set, but of course I have to recognize my good friend, Governor Brian from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and my dear friend Rosie, who's here as well, and all the other dignitaries who have traveled from far and wide to be here with us. Distinguished delegates, fellow island leaders, climate finance experts, and esteemed guests. It is my distinct honor to welcome you to the beautiful island of Nevis and to this historic gathering, the first ever forum on climate finance for subnational island jurisdictions and overseas territories. Today marks a pivotal moment in our collective journey towards climate resilience. As Premier and Minister of Finance of the Nevis Island Administration, I stand before you not just as your host, but as a fellow advocate who has witnessed firsthand both the challenges and the possibilities that define our island communities. We gather here because we share a common understanding. Traditional climate finance mechanisms have not been designed with our specific circumstances in mind. Our subnational status, our geographic isolation, our small economies, and our disproportionate vulnerability to climate impacts create a perfect storm that demands innovative, tailored financial solutions. The science, ladies and gentlemen, is clear, and the evidence surrounds us all. Rising sea levels, intensifying hurricanes, prolonged droughts, and unpredictable weather patterns are not distant threats. They are our daily lived reality. Yet, despite bearing minimal responsibility for global emissions, our island jurisdictions face some of the highest costs of climate adaptation and mitigation. Our challenges are multifaceted. Limited access to international finance. Many of us are not eligible for official development assistance, and application processes are often complex and resource intensive. High vulnerability to climate hazards. Our exposure to frequent disasters increases our need for substantial climate finance. Economic constraints. Small domestic markets and narrow export bases make us economically vulnerable. Capacity limitations. Diverse jurisdictions and limited institutional capacity complicate the application of one-size-fits-all approaches. Inadequate financing mechanisms. Existing climate finance instruments often have stringent criteria that hinder access. Research and data gaps. There is a lack of comprehensive studies on our specific climate finance needs and mechanisms. But I stand before you today not just to outline challenges. I come with evidence that these obstacles can be overcome. Nevis has become a living laboratory for innovative climate finance solutions, demonstrating how subnational island jurisdictions can lead by example through strategic partnerships and blended financing mechanisms. Our flagship geothermal energy project exemplifies what's possible when innovative financing meets determined leadership. In February of 2025, we achieved an historic breakthrough when St. Kitts and Nevis secured full financing for our first geothermal energy project. This transformative initiative represents one of the most successful climate finance mobilization efforts by a subnational island jurisdiction to date. The financing structure demonstrates the power of strategic partnerships. The Green Climate Fund leadership. The GCF has provided US $51.6 million to towards the Nevis geothermal energy project thus far, channels through the Caribbean Development Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. Innovative South-South Cooperation, the Saudi Fund for Development, has contributed US $20 million to the geothermal project, demonstrating how non-traditional partnerships can unlock climate finance. Additional funding. We are in discussions with the GCF, the CDB, and the CARICOM Development Fund, CDF, to secure additional financing for subsequent phases of the geothermal energy project. We are also working with other partners to secure financing for grid-scale solar energy and BESS projects. Project specifications and impact, capacity and scale. The planned geothermal power plant will generate more than 100% of Nevis's domestic electricity demand, facilitating export to sink kits and ensuring that our baseload demand is adequately covered with firm renewable energy capacity. Regional transformation potential. With our extraordinary geothermal potential, and the scientists put that at somewhere close to 1 gigawatt of power, and the expected baseload demand of St. Kitts and Nevis of only 30 megawatts, we can not only service our own needs, but export to the region as well, and we can also tap into emerging green energy markets. The economic impact is clear. Over 97% of our electricity generation has been based on imported fossil fuel with very high costs and risks as we remain as an island open to the exogenous shocks that occur elsewhere. Our commitment to integrated solutions has already earned international recognition. I am proud to announce that Nevis recently won the Best Energy Resilience Project Award at CREF 2025 for our groundbreaking solar-powered desalination plant. This achievement demonstrates how subnational island jurisdictions can successfully implement cutting-edge technology to address multiple climate vulnerabilities simultaneously. Our solar desalination project showcases several key innovations. 1, renewable energy integration. The facility is powered by solar photovoltaic systems, reducing dependence on fossil fuels for critical water production. 2, water security enhancement. The plant produces potable water, improving our water resilience. 3, financial innovation. The project was supported by grant financing, demonstrating how specialized financing mechanisms can support integrated climate solutions. 4, replicability. The technology and financing model can be adapted by other island jurisdictions facing similar water and energy challenges. But beyond geothermal and solar desalination, we have developed an integrated renewable energy strategy. We have successfully implemented a wind farm that contributes to our renewable energy mix, demonstrating our capacity to manage complex renewable energy projects. We are developing utility-scale solar PV projects with battery storage systems, BESS, and additional wind capacity. This strategic approach allows our geothermal power plant to run as baseload, while solar and wind handle intermediate and peak loads, avoiding costly cycling of geothermal facilities and ensuring optimal use of all resources. Our energy efficiency initiatives have already generated measurable benefits, including a 30% power reduction at our Alexandra Hospital here in Nevis, following energy efficiency interventions, demonstrating how climate finance can improve essential services while reducing emissions. We are now embarking on a second phase of energy efficiency projects and distributed renewable energy integration at all government facilities. Within the context of our federal energy policy and our national commitments, we here in Nevis have developed our own Nevis energy policy to further guide our specific needs, focusing on renewable energy transition, energy efficiency, infrastructure resilience, and regional interconnection. We offer concrete incentives, tax breaks, subsidies, grants, and technical support to expedite our transition to a sustainable island state. Our approach, ladies and gentlemen, extends beyond energy alone, demonstrating how climate finance can generate multiple dividends. Beyond our award-winning desalination plant, we are pursuing comprehensive renewable energy-powered water systems and energy-efficient distribution networks, addressing water security while reducing emissions. We will also be pursuing geothermal energy direct uses and renewable energy for irrigation and food processing support of our food security objectives while creating new jobs and new economic opportunities. Our renewable energy initiatives will create jobs in the local economy, providing training and capacity building, and support small and medium enterprises across multiple sectors. We are working strategically to maximize our regional and indeed global impact. Despite being on different sides politically, that is, between those now at the helm at the federal level and I, because we here in Nevis sit in opposition at the national level, we are collaborating very closely with the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis, leveraging federal support and pursuing joint initiatives for mutual benefit. We are developing infrastructure for power exchange with St. Kitts, allowing us to scale up our geothermal capacity to meet baseload demand not only for Nevis, but for both islands. This creates significant economies of scale with attendant cost reductions, a model that can be replicated throughout the Caribbean and beyond. Along with interconnection to St. Kitts, we are exploring export opportunities and building regional partnerships to optimize resource utilization, bringing major social, economic, and environmental benefits whilst fostering greater regional cooperation. Our success demonstrates several replicable financing approaches. We have successfully combined grants, concessional loans, and technical assistance from multiple sources. The Green Climate Fund, Caribbean Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Saudi Fund for Development, and the UAE Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund, creating a financing package that no single institution could have provided alone. Our approach to attracting both domestic and foreign investment includes comprehensive risk assessment, transparent governance, structures, and performance-based monitoring that helps to build investor confidence. South-South cooperation. Our partnerships with the Saudi Fund for Development and the United Arab Emirates Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund represent innovative models of climate finance cooperation between developing countries, moving beyond the traditional North-South funding patterns. Our award-winning desalination project demonstrates how sector-specific financing mechanisms can address multiple climate vulnerabilities while achieving international recognition for innovation and effectiveness. Our initiatives are delivering tangible results. Universal energy access programs with innovative pricing policies ensuring affordable energy for all of our citizens. Job creation and economic growth through local renewable energy industries. Capacity building programs that strengthen our institutional capabilities. SME support initiatives that diversify our economic base and create greater resilience. Healthcare improvements through renewable energy integration in critical facilities. Water security enhancement through our award-winning desalination technology. The international community has taken notice of our achievements. The recent visit by the Green Climate Fund Executive Director, Mafalda Duarte, in March of 2025 underscored the transformative potential of our approach. Our recognition at CREF 2025 for the Best Energy Resilience Project places Nevis among the global leaders in integrated climate solutions. This forum, ladies and gentlemen, represents more than a gathering. It represents a movement. The Nevis model demonstrates that with proper financing mechanisms, subnational island jurisdictions can become catalysts for regional transformation and global innovation. The financing lessons from our experience include simplified access mechanisms that reduce bureaucratic barriers while maintaining fiduciary standards. Alternative financing instruments that recognize our unique risk profiles and development trajectories. Regional pooling arrangements that create economies of scale for smaller projects. Performance-based funding that rewards measurable outcomes and builds longer-term investor confidence. Integrated sector approaches that maximize impact across multiple development objectives. Over the next day, we have the opportunity to scale proven approaches that have worked in our diverse contexts. We have the opportunity to build partnerships that transcend traditional boundaries. We have the opportunity to advocate collectively for policy changes that recognize our unique circumstances and yet our enormous potential. And we have opportunities, ladies and gentlemen, to design financing instruments that can unlock the resources our communities need. As we embark then on these important discussions, I challenge each of you to think beyond conventional frameworks. The solutions we develop here in Nevis can serve as a blueprint for island jurisdictions globally. Our collective voice can influence international climate finance architecture to be more inclusive, accessible, and responsive to subnational needs. The Nevis experience proves that when we combine leadership, strategic partnerships, innovative financing mechanisms, and an unwavering commitment to our communities, we can achieve transformational change. We have mobilized millions in climate finance for our geothermal project alone, achieved international recognition for our integrated water energy solutions, and demonstrated that subnational island jurisdictions can successfully access and manage substantial international resources while delivering award-winning results. To our international partners and funders, Nevis stands as proof that investing in subnational island jurisdictions generates returns that extend far beyond our shores. The Green Climate Fund, Caribbean Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, Saudi Fund for Development, and UAE Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund are seeing their investments catalyze regional transformation and earn international recognition. To my fellow island leaders, let us use our demonstrated successes to strengthen our networks and amplify our advocacy. The financing mechanisms we have pioneered and the innovations we have achieved can be adapted and scaled across our diverse jurisdictions. To our technical experts, your knowledge and innovations are the keys to scaling the solutions that we need and that have been proven to work. Together, we can create financing instruments that are both rigorous and accessible, supporting projects that achieve global recognition for excellence. Together, we can ensure that no island is left behind in the transition to a climate-resilient future. Today, we move from advocacy to demonstration, from challenges to solutions, from isolation to collaboration. We have the evidence, we have the experience, we have the international recognition, we have the partnerships to create lasting change, and above all, I think, we have the momentum. Welcome to Nevis. Welcome to this groundbreaking forum, and welcome to the next chapter in climate finance for island communities, one where we lead by example, earn international recognition, and prove to the world that transformation is not only possible, but already underway. Thank you, and I wish this conference every success.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you for showing us not only the challenges, but also showing us that solutions are there already. And congratulations with the Energy Resilience Award of CREF. Yes, indeed. It's worth an applause for sure. In order to understand even better what we mean with climate finance for subnational island jurisdictions and overseas territories, we asked both James Elsmore, CEO of Island Innovation, and Eike Krips, lawyer and partner at Bundesloch Lawyers, to set the scene for us and guide us through the technical aspects of SNIJs and OTs. James, may I ask you to come upstairs? Upstairs. Very high, very high.
Thank you, Bianca. Good morning, everybody. Recognize the Honorable Premier and His Excellency, the Governor of the US Virgin Islands, as well as all of the other dignitaries who've joined us today, recognizing the protocol already established. We are thrilled to be here, back in Nevis again. We learned a lot on Monday at the Geothermal Forum. And this event today, as Bianca will tell you, has come from a partnership over the last few years with the government of Curaçao and the special envoy representing Sint Eustatius, Saba, and Bonaire, that is focused on the specific challenges that those islands have had, realizing that actually these challenges of falling through the gaps, for want of a better word, when it comes to access to climate finance, apply to a great many other islands that cannot access climate finance as they should be able to, despite facing significant challenges when it comes to adaptation. So based on that, I'd like to introduce a framework that we've been working on just to talk about this term, subnational island jurisdictions, which many of you will be familiar with, some of you may not be so familiar with. The reason that we're using that term is to give a broad definition of the types of subnational island jurisdictions that can participate and have these similar challenges. Many of you represent overseas territories or use similar terms to that, but this is a broad term that has a number of other island jurisdictions included in that. But actually, as we will discover today, many have these same challenges. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So Bianca had already introduced this definition of SNIJs, or SNIJs, or SNIJs. We haven't quite come to an agreement so far. We'll work in progress. I'm not sure if you can read that. I certainly can't from here, so let me just get my phone. This is a definition coming from academia. Erickson et al. Published a paper from the University of Aruba that Bianca had already read. This is a broad definition to cover many, but we've also simplified it to really say that we're looking at populated islands that are in partnership with a parent state, making them non-sovereign with a degree of internal autonomy that may vary widely across SNIJs. So a broad variety of islands, and this classification that we've come up with is an attempt to start looking at what those differences are, the different challenges across the different types of jurisdictions. So next slide, please. Well, I certainly can't read that from here either. So I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. But this classification that's under development has 3 circles that you can see there. Each circle represents a different type of access to climate finance or climate finance eligibility. So the inner ring are countries that are ODA eligible for overseas development assistance. The middle ring is ODA graduated, so we can include St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda in countries that are no longer eligible for overseas development aid, and that also causes some challenges when it comes to access to finance. And then the outer ring is donor countries, and I think it's important to recognize that islands, including the Bess Islands and Curaçao, are often included in that donor country category as Dutch overseas regions. The 4 different quadrants represent different types of island jurisdictions, and I thank you for going to the next slide. So we have on the top side 2 types of jurisdictions that we've identified there. On the top left, enhanced autonomy. I think Nevis is a prime example of an island that has a certain unique degree of autonomy and self-governance. That is an important factor when it comes to its access to climate finance. And then we also have the overseas territories. Next slide, please. So enhanced autonomy, 1 second, often have a specially constituted right or a special status that gives them special self-governance powers. Other examples would include Jeju in South Korea, the Åland Islands in Finland, the Azores in Portugal, Zanzibar in Tanzania, Gozo in Malta, or Rotuma in Fiji. On the other category is local government. So many islands that may have a form of local government that's less autonomous and gives less type of decision-making power. Next slide, please. We then also have regional and state governments. So for example, islands such as Hawaii, Tasmania, the Canary Islands that have a similar status to other regions there. So a wide variety of island jurisdictions, each facing specific challenges, all sharing a difficulty in financing their climate adaptation, and all looking to find solutions for this. And this is hopefully what we're going to approach today. So the reason that I introduced this, this diagram is to give you an idea of a wide variety of islands that have participated in these conversations and the different challenges that they have, but also how mapping and classifying those different challenges can be helpful for us today as we look forward to making solutions. Shortly, you will hear from a range of stakeholders who are visiting here from the different islands, and I think that'll be very important to understand how each island is looking at its own access to finance. But throughout the rest of the day, we'll also be hearing from experts, from banks, from development institutions, from the philanthropy sector, looking at how those different sectors can be mobilized when it comes to new climate finance mechanisms. So the applications from using this typology are several. The gap analysis is critical. Where are the gaps when it comes to SNIJs and accessing climate finance? Once we classify, we can also look at developing policies. So this is a really critical outcome as we come out of this event and launch the SNIJ Climate Coalition, how we'll develop those policies. And then obviously from that, the advocacy will continue. And I really want to congratulate the work that Curaçao and the Special Envoy have done, that you'll hear about more, in developing a legal framework that can move forward with really drawing attention to some of these gaps facing those islands. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to you, Bianca.
Thank you very much, James, for introducing us to SNIJs and OTs and what it all entails for us. Thank you. So now I would like to ask Eike Krips to come on stage. Eike is a lawyer and partner at Bundeslog Lawyers, and he will present to us the legal framework that James was speaking about.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attendance also to this part of the conference, i.e. the legal part. Yeah, you may wonder yourself, in the first place, why is a lawyer speaking at this conference? Because when a lawyer is needed, it's not always good news. But the reason for my involvement here is well, in itself is positive. There's not any intention to commence legal action, but this whole subject of sustainability and the restrictions which subnational island jurisdiction offer and count in that respect, they undeniably also have legal dimensions. So yeah, that's why this legal talk. As already mentioned, I'm a lawyer from the Netherlands, but I have a practice both in the Netherlands and the Dutch Caribbean, so I sort of practice on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, which I, of course, also very much enjoy. But that's also the reason why the legal relationship between the Netherlands and the Dutch Caribbean islands is one of my specialties, and that's also how I arrived at this subject. I have a challenging task to guide you in 10 to 15 minutes or so through this relevant legal aspects of, I call them SNIJs, some call them snitches, and sustainability. And that means the legal obstacles which SNIJs encounter in or when trying to obtain financial support for climate mitigation measures. So this will be very high level. In light of well, the overarching idea of this whole event, sustainability, climate, and especially today financing, I will also sometimes refer to the climate change treaties, with which I mean the UN Framework Treaty, Kyoto Agreement, and a Paris Agreement. Okay, first of all, what are SNIJs? Well, that has already been actually discussed. We can go back once to the previous slide. Yes. Better question is perhaps, where are SNIJs? Because SNIJs are everywhere in the world. Bianca already addressed what SNIJs are, James also, so I will not further amplify on it. Well, as you presumably all know, SNIJs are everywhere in the world, in the Caribbean, of course, in the Pacific, and they're often affiliated with metropolitan countries in Europe or else in the world. The Dutch Caribbean island are also examples of SNIJs. In terms of the United Nations climate change treaties, it is sometimes confusing because sometimes these treaties refer to small island jurisdictions or small island development states, which is not the same. But this whole inconsistent terminology is one of the legal problems for SNIJs, which I'll come to later. So why this, we can go to the next slide, please. Why this presentation? Well, there is clear consensus amongst all of us, and in a wider range, of course, that there's enhanced need for climate adaptation measure. There's also clear consensus that SNIJs are vulnerable in this respect due to their geographical situation and limited resources. So that's why this subject. At the same time, SNIJs often lack financial capacity and financial and human resource to fight climate change. And in addition to that, SNIJs, and that has already been rightfully mentioned, have historically contributed substantially less to climate change as being smaller and less industrialized nations. All these notions have also been repeatedly underpinned by the UN climate change treaties. And these concerns, which we discussed today, are also placed legally more and more in the context of climate justice and the protection of human rights. And for example, there are various court cases also about this subject, some successful, some not successful. I will not go into this today, but the famous example is, of course, the court case commenced by the island of Vanuatu before the International Court of Justice in The Hague, supported by 100 other countries. Okay, so there's an increasing demand for taking historic responsibility by contributing more to the mitigation of effects of climate change and financing such mitigation measures. That's all very nice and all very ambitious, but the UN climate change treaties and the EU laws also recognize these principles, but still SNIJs encounter a lot of difficulties to obtain financial support for this. Again, that's the goal to discuss and hopefully, well, work towards the resolution of that today. We can go to the next slide, please. So what will I briefly discuss this morning? First of all, what is the common legal organizational framework of SNIJs, and what does that mean for their legal status under the international treaties? And I will use the Dutch Caribbean as an example. And then the second question, how does that legal status of SNIJs often form an obstacle for the attainment of sustainability goals? And for the late afternoon session, so not now, we will discuss a draft declaration which we have drafted, and that will be one of our recommendations. And if I understand correctly, that has been distributed. A copy of that has been or will be shortly distributed to each table. But we'll come to that for the late afternoon session. Let's say this lecture is sort of prelude to the late afternoon session about the joint declaration. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. Yes, so what is the mostly the legal and organizational structure of a SNIJ, and how does it affect its status under international treaties? It has been said that SNIJs are always affiliated with, and in some form, in different degrees, dependent on a federation with some other metropolitan or other, let's say, mainland country. And that country is often a European country with whom a SNIJ has ex-colonial ties. For example, France, United Kingdom, or the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Also on the European law, there are very different degrees of variation. For example, France has a tendency of fully involving its overseas region as fully European territory, the so-called ORs, outermost region. In contrast to the Netherlands, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, because the Dutch Caribbean islands, which is Curaçao, Aruba, and Sint Maarten, and the BES-eiland, Bonaire, Saba, and Statia, these are so-called OCTs, and they have a different status as associated member of the European Union, and that means that an OCT is not EU territory, is not part of the EU internal market, but more importantly for today, a lot of European or EU funding is not available for OCTs, while it is available for ORs. So this European status is also relevant for today's subject. We can go to the next slide, please. So why is the legal structure of SNIJ often an obstacle for fully pursuing its sustainability policy? Well, first of all, SNIJ are often no direct contracting parties to international treaties, also not international climate change treaties. For example, the Kingdom of the Netherlands is a party to international treaties because entering into treaties is considered a foreign affair, and foreign affairs is a kingdom affair. So not the separate countries within the kingdom are party. And the same goes for EU law and EU treaties. These are all entered into a kingdom affair. Secondly, there's quite a common practice of contracting states to only partially ratify international treaty. That means that a party, for example the Kingdom of the Netherlands, enters into a climate change treaty, but it only ratifies that treaty for the territorial scope of, let's say, the European part of the Netherlands, not the Dutch Caribbean islands. And as a result, the Dutch Caribbean islands, are then left out. And I have to say, it's not a unilateral decision of the Netherlands, but still, it's de facto. It is a very, it's a huge disadvantage for the Dutch Caribbean islands. This practice of partial ratification has often been criticized, especially when it comes to climate change treaty, because these are seen as human rights. And you cannot make a differentiation in one kingdom when it comes to human rights. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. This is a little bit complicated topic for now, but just to briefly say, another problem which many SNIJs have is that they are not duly represented in negotiating international treaties. That I'll leave it for now with this brief comment. It's a little bit too complicated to elaborate on today. To the next sheet, please. Another problem is that being part of a larger federation, with a large, let's say, with a larger metropolitan country, again, the Dutch Caribbean island as an example, that prevents that such SNIJs can qualify as so-called SIDS, which is small island development states. But also apart from that, also in economical terms, most SNIJs do not qualify as small island development states because these are not developing countries. Due to this, many SNIJs are even seen as so-called donor countries. And that also applies to the Dutch Caribbean islands. And the fact that SNIJs are not SIDS, that amongst others means that they are not eligible for various funding under UN funds. For example, the UN Fund for Climate Adaptation, the UN Climate Green Fund, and so on. So again, SNIJs seem to fall between a rock and a hard place. And it's also for this reason that this confusing and inconsistent terminology of climate change treaties, small island development states, sub-island countries, that has legally adverse effect and that needs to be revisited. And that's one of our important points today. Okay, I have 2 more minutes, so then we can go to the next slide, please. We can skip this one. We can go to the next one. Yes, thank you. A brief note about the most important climate change treaties. 3 treaties are important. There's the 1992 UN Framework Agreement. It started with that, in fact. That was followed by the Kyoto Agreement in 1997. And then, very importantly, after that, the Paris Treaty came into being. And that was the first international treaty that actually stipulates that contracting states must adopt measures to ensure that the Earth does not warm by more than 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Now, this Paris Agreement not only sets out how the contracting states should respond to the threat of climate change by means of what we call nationally determined contributions, NDCs, but it also makes clear that the more vulnerable countries need to be financially supported, and it clearly aspires the notion of common but differentiated responsibilities, which means, very briefly, that, let's say, the more vulnerable countries like SNIJ, they should also join the treaties, but they should be accommodated in that. They should be financially accommodated so that they also can fulfill their obligations. So the Paris Agreement, it breathes, it aspires the notion that the less developed countries and the small island jurisdiction, they have historically contributed less to climate change. So that's why important principle, the polluter pays. Okay. As I said, this afternoon there will be a special closing session about our proposal to try to work towards a joint declaration. So we will discuss that all this afternoon. Why we do that is, today we will raise a lot of, let's say, issues or, in my case, legal obstacles which SNIJ face with. But that's all very nice and hopefully it's all very insightful for you. But of course what is needed here is an action plan, and that's why we want to present this draft joint declaration. The idea is to share it with you and that during the course of today discuss it with you, develop it further, and then hopefully soon after this we might come to a definitive declaration in joint cooperation with all of us, and then hopefully present it at a later stage, for example the COP30. So yeah, that is the goal of today, but that was for a late afternoon session. So I thank you very much now for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eike, for these insights. And I hope you all are in to work on a joint declaration towards a later moment in time, hopefully at COP30, where we can all sign this declaration together as SNIJ. Let's now learn from the islands around the world with a high-level roundtable session where we hear from 7 different islands how they deal with climate challenges and potentially already unlock climate finance for their islands. Please let me introduce to you the different speakers, and please all come on stage. Honorable Zavargo Jolly, Minister of Tourism, Agriculture, Fisheries, Government of the Turks and Caicos Islands. Albert Bryan Jr., Governor of U.S. Virgin Islands. And actually, Mr. Bryan Jr. came only for today to Nevis. At least for me, it's showing how important subnational island jurisdictions are to you. Honorable Chris Lee, State Senator of Hawaii. Rebecca Fabrizi, UK Special Envoy for Small Island Developing States. Dr. Stefano Moncada, Professor and Director, Islands and Small States Institute, University of Malta. And Honorable Cranston Befongo, Parliamentary Secretary within the Office of the Premier, Government of Montserrat. And I'm thinking I'm missing one indeed. Quincia Gums-Mary, former Minister of Sustainability and Environment of Anguilla. Welcome. So do we have mics for everybody? There's I will move off stage because it's going to be a little bit crowded. So I have to be a little bit strict with this session due to some time constraints. And therefore, I'm asking you to keep all your presentations within 3 minutes. So hopefully we have some time for some intervention with the public as well, because I think everybody would love to hear your perspective on it. So may I first ask you to give your presentation?
Right, good morning, everybody. Morning. Just for pronunciation, I'm not sure if it's important, but my name is Cranston Buffon. Right. Representing, of course, here on behalf of my Premier in Montserrat, Mr. Ruben, Honorable T. Mead, and I'm honored to be here. First, let me compliment Nevis in the strides they're making towards sustainable energy. It's very commendable what they're doing. Montserrat recently graduated from official development assistance. As a result, we are no longer automatically eligible for concessional financing from many of the international institutions that previously supported our resilience and our development goals. A good example is the Basic Needs Trust Fund. While we have not lost access entirely, we are no longer automatically eligible to meet their assistance. What it means that every cycle we have to go before them and renegotiate, losing time and everything else that goes along with that. Now, this approach presents some uncertainty and delays and reflects a wider issue for territories such as ours. GDP per capita is a very poor measure of capacity. Our figures are inflated by externally funded consultants and technical assistance. What it does not reflect our actual fiscal space, nor does it shows our local capacity or resilience of our systems, and certainly not our ability to independently fund climate adaptation. So we're in a very difficult position to develop for routine assistance, but not developed enough to stand our own. And as climate risk goes, our access to finance becomes very limited. Now, the UK government, we are very thankful to them, remains our key capital funding partners, and they support our investments and align with our climate resilience. We also work with the Caribbean Development Bank, and we also work with programs such as the Darwin initiatives. But of course, these are applications, and sometimes you do not really, you're not successful. So what support do we really need? We need strength. We need to strengthen our ability to access and manage the finances. We also need technical assistance. And of course, financial access to predictable, and I use the word predictable, in that way you know what you can get. Concessional funding based on our vulnerability, not just our income status. Policy and political assistance as well in reviewing some of the frameworks that are consistently disadvantaged to non-sovereign and small island territories. So more than equity, global finance must be credible. It must be grounded in exposure, not in income brackets, in vulnerability, not outdated indicators. Of course, small islands should not have to ask for exemptions. We are in very exemptional situations. We are not asking for recognition also, but of our risk, of our realities, our loss and damage, and our ability to mitigate first, then rebound effectively or quickly after any disaster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Stefano Moncada, may I please ask you to address your keynote?
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you overall and the organizers, and of course to Premier and the government of Nevis and St. Kitts and Nevis for this beautiful gathering and all my colleagues. So we would like to also pay respect to many of the SNIJs that are not only here but all around the world for their rich culture, biodiversity, history, the dynamic society and economies that have managed to thrive, notwithstanding the many vulnerabilities that SNIJs face. The last count tell us that we have more or less 115 SNIJs, recognized and distributed more or less equally all around the world. What characterizes them is, of course, high degree of vulnerability, like many SIDS, of course, experience as well, but with the added burden of the double insularity. So we're not only insularity to the rest of the world, but there is the double insularity to the main or sister islands. Now, I think that the debate over how and the degree to which many SNIJs and SIDS in general are vulnerable should be over. SIDS and SNIJs have been ranking high in the vulnerability for the rest of, since we have invented any vulnerability and resilience index. And we don't need to prove this any longer. Of course, we have to be there, providing the data and continuing to do so. But I guess that the debate can and perhaps would be better to focus on what we're doing to address these vulnerabilities. Like we heard in these days and today as well from the Premier, the capacity of Nevis to tackle some of these vulnerabilities by increasing their resilience, by focusing on good governance and creating an enabling environment that allows you to tap into your resources and overcome these vulnerabilities is very important. However, and this comes my main point, building this resilience, increasing the governance levels and creating opportunities costs much more for SNIJs, for SIDS in general, than any other country. The cost per capita is tremendous. And in many cases, like we heard just now from Montserrat, and I am sure there are examples all over the room that we will hear today. GDP, of course, is not the measurement we should take, and the cost per capita are much higher to do anything. Anything that SNIJs do start with a disadvantage, which is not their own fault. And many times they have succeeded, and we are penalizing this success by not accessing concessional funding or by starting from a position of disadvantage without recognizing that. And I think this is not just unfair, but it's literally the wrong economic incentive. So there is space to fix this. We have been working on different indices, and I've done also vulnerability and resiliences indices for all the SNIJs and countries and SIDS in the world. And we have the research there that tells us that this can change, and there are some new criteria that could be included for accessing or funding in general, and starting to shift the debate towards the cost of building resilience, which are much higher for SNIJs and SIDS, and this is not being accounted for, and we should start to switch the debate towards this. So this is my main point, and I'm sure we can have more others as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Fabrici, may I ask you to give your speech?
Sure. Is this working?
Should be. Is it?
Hi, that's better. Thank you very much, Bianca. Thank you very much to our hosts and to the organisers. It's a really great pleasure to be at this forum, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. SNIJ or SNIJ, but I prefer SNIJ because it makes me think of Harry Potter, which I think is a shining example of creativity and economic success. It's a new term on me, but I think that was a really fantastic context that we had from our presenters earlier about the different categories of island jurisdictions who all face quite similar challenges but have different access to solutions. I'm not a big expert in SNIJs, I should say, a bit of an interloper. I spend most of my time looking at SIDS independent countries and their issues, and I realize there are higher barriers for countries which are subnational. From the UK, we have a very high number of islands. I think it's something like more than 160 inhabited islands, a very large number of which are in Scotland, and also around other parts of the British Isles. And I think if we bring in the whole British Isles with Ireland, it's something like 280 inhabited islands, which is really quite a high number. I think it would be really wonderful to have representative of Scottish government here at another one of these gatherings, because they have some particular legislation and policies for the around 100 Scottish islands, including around access to finance and so on. There's another layer of governance complication there, because our administrations in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland are devolved. So there's a complex array of different legislative levels there, which we don't need to go into. But I think they would have some very interesting information to share. And they also are working on capacity building platforms which are open to other countries. And I think that they are interested also in opening out those capacity building platforms to SIDS and possibly also to subnational jurisdictions. So if you would like contacts around that, please do ask me afterwards. It's really a great pleasure to meet so many representatives of UK overseas territories. We are really proud of our overseas territories and some of the incredible successes as well that they've had, as Stefano mentioned, using their own resources, working to create economic growth and success, whether it's through tourism, financial services and other services, fishing and other areas, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that today. We are aware that there is high levels of vulnerability and that accessing some funds is not available to overseas territories, and that is a problem, and we're aware of that. I'm not able to say very much about UK policies at the moment because we're in the middle of a whole spending review process in a rather gloomy fiscal situation, so I don't actually have any details of how that's going to turn out, although there should be some more information coming up, I think, in June. But as our colleague from Montserrat said, I absolutely sympathize with your comments about vulnerability. I think the exit of Montserrat from eligibility for overseas development assistance at the same time as its budget is around 67% financed by overseas development assistance is perhaps the most shining example of how that particular criterion doesn't reflect the vulnerability of small island nations, and so that's absolutely well seen. Just to mention a couple of projects that we do, which I think are really wonderful. The Blue Belt Programme, which is a real flagship marine protection programme that I think is extremely important, and Pitcairn Marine Protected Area as well. These are really very large and very significant marine protection areas, which are very important, of course, to global goods. And then we've had some really great discussions over the last few days on the opportunities. I think the Premier's speech was a really brilliant example of how a small island has seized opportunities for economic growth. We've had some really interesting speakers looking at private sector and entrepreneurial and other opportunities that small islands can seize on to help develop their economies, that I think is really fantastic. And it's really great to see representatives of the private sector here as well. So I hope that we can do more information sharing, look at ways to seek avenues for economic development through information sharing and learning from best practice and capacity building, and look at those opportunities to thrive economically. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm frankly quite excited to see the collaboration and discussion that's been going on, because that's really important. So I want to talk about two things. One is the collaboration that we've shared with a number of other island communities in Hawaii that have helped address some of the issues that we've learned about and been able to implement. And the second thing is, what has that actually looked like in terms of implementation from our government? In Hawaii, we're 8 main islands that are populated and about 100 other islands that are not. safe to say we're mostly sustainable, but for those islands where there's people, we're still working to address that, and that's been a journey. We've been a part of something that Hawaii now co-chairs, which is called the Local 2030 Islands Network, which is really a network in collaboration of about 25 island communities in various places around the world. And it's a way for island communities to really just focus on collaboration around the SDGs, exactly the kinds of conversations that are happening here, I think, in real time. And for us, it's been really helpful because, frankly, we've learned a lot along the way. We've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. Small ones like, I thought I'm going to a conference at an island community, I don't need to bring a suit. To big ones like, we're investing in the wrong projects. And we have invested in the wrong projects along the way, and that doesn't work out. It's gonna happen, but it doesn't mean we're not justified in collaboration and moving ahead despite that. And that's why I think this kind of conversation is so important, because we can learn from each other and not repeat those same mistakes in a way that's just much more efficient and much more productive. The Local 23 Islands Network itself focuses collaboratively in agreement on 4 main issue areas: clean energy, water, regenerative and resilient tourism, how to do that in a sustainable way, and really data around climate resilience and efforts. And it does that by really identifying and translating those things into real action. Identifying what those SDGs are that are appropriate for a place, and really what does it mean to actually turn those into actionable steps, because it's going to look different everywhere based on the specifics of that particular location. Secondly, builds public-private partnerships with local businesses and NGOs and other collaborators with policymakers so that you have the political and other support you need to move ahead when there's something to be done. And it measures those SDGs and their progress. And in Hawaii, for example, this is looked like a simple dashboard I talked about the other day, actually, which identifies the issues we're working on, gives us a simple grade as we move forward, and says, are we making progress or not? And holds leaders accountable no matter who they are, no matter which administration comes into power or anything like that. And finally, translates that into taking concrete action. And for Hawaii and our government, the tools that we've put in place, which may be replicable elsewhere, I want to highlight just a couple that to help finance and pay for this stuff. First of all, identified what the cost is going to be. So we did high-level and deep dive analysis looking at what is sea level rise going to cost us, for example. And we know it's going to be $19 billion in infrastructure at a minimum over the next few decades. So it's easier for us to go to hotels and say, for example, you're losing your beach. That is the primary reason people are coming to see you. Why don't you pay just a little bit more in a special fee to pay so that we can maintain those beaches for you and keep that economic engine going that drives you? We have funding mechanisms that we put in place. Every fossil fuel that comes into the state, and we're entirely reliant on imported fossil fuels. We have none indigenously. We charge $1.05 per barrel of oil coming in that gets put into sustainable agriculture, advancing renewable energy, and other things. We have bond financing that allows us special mechanisms to target communities that need that help with cheap cost. We have fees we put on rental cars that we translate into investment into local infrastructure and things like that. And most of all, just in the last couple days, actually, we signed into law a new climate fee, which applies to all hotel rooms, Airbnbs, cruise ship rooms. And it's a small percentage, which is going to raise about $100 million a year that's specifically going into financing and paying for climate-related interventions, and really unlocking as a matching source of funding a lot more of the investment and finance that we need to be able to reduce risk, to attract investment and get projects done. So there's a lot to unpack, but since my time's up, I'll gladly take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. And indeed, I have to admit, I am part of the steering committee of the Local 2030 Island Network, and it's an amazing network. So I would invite you all to go online and check it out, because there's a lot of data available over there as well. Thank you. Mrs. Gums-Mary, may I ask you to address your speech?
Thank you. And thank you to the government of Nevis for hosting this very timely, necessary conference. There is a question that I was asked, and the reality is I didn't really have a response. If small island developing states are suffering from an invisibility crisis, then it is safe to say that subnational island jurisdictions and overseas territories simply do not exist. How can the world acknowledge the climate crisis as a defining threat to our survival, recognize the development injustices we face, and still say to us, your survival must fit within the parameters of global politics? How can it be that the most vulnerable amongst us must navigate systems that were not built for us, not with us in mind, and often not even with our names on the register? This is the question I have been asking since 2020, when, as an elected official in the government of Anguilla, I spoke to the United Kingdom about our exclusion from equitable access to climate finance. I was reminded in more ways than one that my questions were inconvenient, especially coming from a vessel that was too audacious, too insignificant, and too black. But I asked anyway. And today, we are at the beginning of a new era where the overseas territories are finally in advanced discussions with the United Kingdom government for a climate fund. But let us be clear, acknowledgement is not justice, presence is not access, and incremental inclusion is not transformation. We need a complete system overhaul, a new global funding architecture that prioritizes the vulnerable over geopolitics. Climate finance must be guided not by colonial legacies or strategic alliances, but by moral clarity and human need. The climate crisis is not interested in who is self-governing, who is independent, or who still reports to a monarch. It does not negotiate, it only accelerates. So in response, we must rethink everything. While today, as we gather as subnational jurisdictions and overseas territories, our advocacy cannot be an instance of preaching to the choir or the repeated scenario of funding agencies and development partners simply pitying our reality and saying there's nothing that they can do when they are the underwriters of the policies that govern us. And I want to make it clear that our systemic exclusion is not just our problem. It is an example of what can happen and what may even come. What happens when the next superpower declares that climate finance will be contingent on abandoning citizen by investment programs, or tied to military cooperation, or some other foreign policy litmus test? We must not allow a reality where access to survival can be weaponized. Therefore, all of our leaders should demand better. Let us push for a global climate finance mechanism that decouples access from status, from alignment, and from historic hierarchies. One that centers climate vulnerability as a primary criterion for support. Because no island should have to beg for what the planet is already owed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful speech. Mr. Bryan, Jr.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Premier, the Honorables. It's great to be in Nevis again. Sitting on the stage up here, I thought it's really ironic because our story is a lot different. As a result of first of all, the Virgin Islands are 3 islands that have about 87,000 people on it. It's separated into 2 districts, so you can figure about 40,000 people in 2 districts. And the irony of it is that global climate change is what created the situation that we are in today. So through my team and a lot of haggling, we have been able to secure $23 billion in aid from the United States government for the rebuilding of our complete infrastructure. Just to put that in perspective, our recovery effort is 5 times our economy. So just in production alone, in terms of energy, there's over $2 billion dedicated to redoing the energy of the Virgin Islands, something around 90 megawatts. What's even funnier is none of that money we're using right now to deal with our energy problem. Right now we're at 43 cents a kilowatt hour that we're paying for power, which is really high. But at one time in the 2009s or so, we were up to 53 cents a kilowatt hour. The answer really is in the delta between what our governments are able to produce power for and what investors are able to produce power for. So we were able to go look to the private sector and had an investor come in and say, listen, we're going to negotiate 11 cents a kilowatt hour power for you. So the delta between that and 43 is 32 cents. That's a lot of financing. And I know a lot of you have the same situation in your island. In the real cost of production of that kilowatt hour using fossil fuel is about 21 cents. And if people say, you know, I never thought of myself as a green governor. When you're on an island, you ain't green, you're just trying to survive. We gotta save our water, we have to get solar. I mean, these are not things that we do because they sound good. Now, when you add the carbon credits that the producer of the energy gets too, that's more money for them, creating sustainability and financing options for you. VI Electron is the company that we dealt with, and he told me to tell all of you, he's ready to come do it for you. And so what we have is we're going to be able, by the end of 2026, we'll have, between solar and battery, we'll have about 90 megawatts of daytime power. We peak at 90. So we'll eventually, and we're stopping programs right now, eventually we're going to have more daytime running solar than we have a need for, which is, the vision is to create an economic free trade zone in the Virgin Islands where we could sell manufacturing power for 12 to 13 cents kilowatts. Coupled with the fact that the Virgin Islands is a US jurisdiction that's outside the US customs zone. So none of the Trump tariffs apply to us. And we can forgive your income tax 90%, creating a perfect storm for economic development. And this has nothing to do with all the money we have to rebuild the infrastructure. So it's that kind of creative way that I see the financing. I mean, as governor, I have a hard time proving this or getting this point across with my public, but the government is terrible at running certain businesses. They're terrible. Power, healthcare, the things in our community, what we could partner with and get the airport, we just got into a P3 with that, where we can get into partnerships with private sector companies, we should do it because it makes sense. The other thing is, especially here in the Caribbean, I spent a lot of time traveling around now, is we got to civilize the Caribbean. You know what? And I think Nevis has it right? And when I say by civilized, it's specialized in what you have. Thermal energy. Why should everybody build power plants if Nevis could provide energy for us? If we have transportation, who's the best at transportation? Who's the best at food production? Who's the best at negotiating with foreign governments? Who's the best at climate change and resiliency and responding to natural disasters? And capitalize, especially our small islands. Capitalize on that island and feed into that economy. I'm here in Nevis and I'm speaking to all islands. We have a 4% unemployment rate. We issued $3 billion in contracts this year alone. We need people. The Virgin Islands was built by the Eastern Caribbean in the 1970s. They came there and built our economy. We need that to happen again. So if you're anywhere in the world, even if you're in Hawaii, we got room for you too, eh? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Jolly.
Good morning, everyone. Definitely sensing a trend on this panel, but to be clear, I have absolutely no problem piling on. which I intend to do as quickly as possible. So, good morning, distinguished colleagues, moderators, and guests. It is a privilege and an honor to be here in Nevis, and I thank our hosts for bringing us together at a time when island voices need to be heard louder than ever. In the Turks and Caicos Islands, we are facing the realities of climate change daily. Stronger storms, eroding coastlines, dying reefs. Our economy depends on the very ecosystems that are currently under threat. We are taking action. We've launched a national climate risk assessment. We've partnered with the CDP on coastal defense, and we've begun our solar transition, starting with solar lighting across all our public streets and public areas around the islands. But progress is not just about ideas. It has become more and more about access. So to be clear about our situation, as a British overseas territory, we have fallen through the metaphorical crack. We cannot access UK domestic funding, similar to partners like Scotland and Wales, and due to our constitutional relationship as an overseas territory, we are not eligible for global climate funding from organizations like the UNFCCC programs, and also due to Brexit, we can no longer access EU funding, which has served us quite well in the past. Even in our own region, we are not fully integrated to enjoy the full benefit of organizations that we truly endear, like CARICOM and the OECS. So again, because of our constitutional situation and our status with the UK, we are quite limited. On a much more lighthearted note, I have to say, I watched with real admiration this week at the opening ceremony when the Premier of Nevis, in his role as leader of the opposition, stood up and actually praised the Prime Minister for their geothermal work and partnership. Now, simultaneously, I leaned over to my counterpart from St. Lucia at the same time and mentioned to her that that would never happen in the Turks and Caicos. But I've come to realize that that's the point. Unity in itself is a form of climate resilience, and that's why I'm here today. And it brings me to a much greater purpose for us as an OT, and that's independence. Because every investment we make in solar and water and in food is not just environmental. My colleague to the right of me talked about its survival. For large countries, it looks good to grow green, or it looks good to fine-tune your economy. It looks good to be sustainable. But for countries in the Caribbean, particularly OTs, it's literally our existence. And for us especially, it's our path to a free and constitutionally independent Turks and Caicos Islands. So energy independence, food security, economic freedom, it is a clear and strategic move towards our sovereignty. Our long-term goal is constitutional independence. But while we continue to build the resilience and sustainability necessary to get there, we must have access to funding that already exists. And that is the future that I'm here to fight for. And that is why we must find ways to access the tools to build it. So yes, we are calling on the UK, the UN, and our global partners to create fairer and clearer pathways for territory like ours. But more than that, we are calling on our Caribbean brothers and sisters to stand with each other and share your resources and to lift each other up and create meaningful collaboration that will benefit us for years to come. Because as one of the smaller delegations here today, I'd like to leave you with this reminder. In the Turks and Caicos Islands, we may be considered little, but as we were reminded during the opening ceremony on Tuesday, as the saying goes, little but telewa. So we're small, yes, but we're prepared to move mountains if you're willing to work with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jolly. Are there any questions in the room? We have time for 2. Don't be shy. Yeah, I see a hand. Let me walk over.
Hi, good morning. Wonderful presentation by the panel. On the panel, we have a lot of overseas territories as well as the lady from the UK. What's the possibility of us as overseas territories working together to solve the issue? Instead of trying to get external parties, what's the possibility of us working together to solve it?
Very nice question. Who wants to go first?
I think it's an excellent opportunity for us to get solve it. We all have different resources, but there's a lot of resilience, a resistance between American politics and us. Like, we're Caribbean people. We're probably one of the most diverse populations in the Caribbean, but the U.S. Doesn't want us speaking one-on-one with other governments, foreign governments, and frankly, the foreign governments think we're U.S. spies, but
Or UK spies.
so, but there are, I think, not on the political level, but one step down, there are plenty of opportunities like this for us to work together and realize that we each don't have to be specialized in everything. We could just help one another by using the talents of the other place.
Any other thoughts on this? Yes, please go ahead.
I think as the overseas territories, we are guided by the work that is done by UCATA, the UK Overseas Territories Association, and they have done most of the lobbying, I would say, in the United Kingdom on behalf of the overseas territories of the region and other places that they are scattered throughout the world. And one of the issues that we find, though, is that we can't really have the necessary conversations with other development partners because they are, in essence, speaking to the United Kingdom when they're speaking to an Anguillian minister or Monstrasian minister. And it causes some level of complexities when it comes down to signing agreements, receiving international funds and such, because I know for the Anguillian context, that sits with the governor in our constitution. So even when there is a willingness, there are bureaucratic red tapes that kind of prevents any meaningful conversations to advance beyond just the well-intention of the first conversation. I was even considering the treaty that was being discussed as something that we can decide to sign at COP, when in truth that's something for Anguilla, and I'm pretty sure for the other overseas territories, would have to go through the executive council, would have to be approved by the governor, and you see how there are many opportunities for something that's well-intentioned to be slowed down or even not occur at all.
Can I say one more thing too? I think every one of us here, especially in the Caribbean, we're the subject of colonial wealth. Like, these major countries now, first world countries, made incredible wealth using these islands. The US, good US, bad US right now, has stepped up. I mean, for us, Tortola got the same 2 storms we got, the British Virgin Islands. The UK gave them $30 million. We got $23 billion. The United States Congress said we're going to rebuild everything that is more than 50% damaged, whether the storm caused it or not. That's a mandate that we should force all these first world countries to do for these small islands, especially here in the Caribbean, where sugar, wood, and slave labor has enriched them for hundreds of years.
I'll just add in.
I'm
I
proud.
talked with the governor just a little bit ago about this. In spite of the US politics right now, we're a state already, even though we're the subject of very recent colonization. We've been a state only since 1959. Before that, it was a whole different situation. But screw it, we're gonna help others, and we hope others will help us, because frankly, we're in the same position as everybody, right? We're islands. If we don't make it, we don't make it. And so for us, I think part of the thing is, how do we have these conversations in a way where we can learn? And the way we've learned so far with all the progress we've made, which has been significant in the last decade, but certainly with a long road ahead, has been because of lessons learned from other island communities that we've been able to incorporate and be more efficient about moving forward with. I think that's the only way we do this. So whether it is through this forum or any number of others out there, the Local 2030 Hub that I'd mentioned earlier has a bunch of folks working on stuff, as well as, of course, at the UN and regionally, not just here, but different places around the world, in East Asia and whatever. The lessons are all the same. The issues are, for the most part, fundamentally all the same. It's cost, it's sustainability, it's transportation, it's logistics, it's all these things. And the solutions are universal as well in many cases at their root core. And that is why committing, I think, more than anything, to continuing to have these conversations in spite of the barriers is so important. It took me like, what felt like 2 days and many thousands of dollars to get here, but I'm here because this is valuable. And I'm here because it's more important for us to keep this dialogue going in the long run. I think that's the most important thing right now, in spite of any of the rhetoric and politics that we all face where we're from.
Thank you. Mr. Moncada?
I think there is a... Can you hear me? Yeah. So I think in a context where development funds are going down or being erased overnight, the role of capacity building, technical assistance, and island-to-island cooperation is extremely important. Now, we also can tap into existing funds and resources. We have recently assisted the government of Malta through the Foreign Affairs Minister to engage in this island-to-island technical assistance where, in a dialogue with Antigua, we have provided our expertise on desalination and improved technologies to increase efficiency in the production of water. We understood each other in one afternoon. So the dialogue and the importance of the settings that islanders to islanders can provide are enormous. Now, I am sure, because this has been happening for a long time in any region, that island-to-island cooperation can be one of the most important steps forward that we can have. And we can tap into it now because we've been doing it for a very, very long time. And here I would like to highlight, by finishing here, that the role of research is important to be there. It doesn't sit on a shelf, right? I mean, many of our colleagues here at the university, including in this region, want to cooperate to inform and guide policy and provide solutions that are applicable at any moment, and can also work together with all the institutions to make it happen, right? So I think this is something that should be tapped into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any last words from somebody before we go for a quick break? I see two hands.
Can I just, yeah. Is this working? Yeah. I do think this cooperation is really, really important. I mean, similarly to Stefano, but also size is really important, right? When you're looking for investment and doing projects and so on, the fact that a lot of these areas are very small makes it more difficult. And I think working together and looking at the regional cooperation and making the best use of regional organizations and so on in order to prepare sort of investment readiness and so on can only be extremely helpful. We definitely see it with companies from the UK that are looking at projects and so on for, airport redevelopments and so on across the region. They are very interested in working in different countries and territories across the region because it's more efficient for them. It makes their work with UK export finance to look at financial cover and so on simpler and facilitates that investment. So this cooperation around project readiness and investment readiness is really important. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jolly, last words for you.
Thank you. So I don't see the fight against, or the way to have an impact with climate resilience as a singular approach. I genuinely think it's tiered. We have to think about it as global, regional, and domestic. And we've talked about the global situation, especially for overseas territories. And that's the limitation because of our constitutional relationships, which is almost like an unholy alliance. It seems like a partnership that you may not even be a willing participant in. And those of us that are or have been cabinet members, we know about collective responsibility, which usually only benefits the one with the loudest voice and the most votes. So when you're talking about an overseas territory, we're so limited because of the nature of this relationship, and we don't get to dictate the clauses. But the reality is, and I think my colleague here said it best, is that we have been able as Caribbean countries to build very successful nations while having our resources almost pillaged for centuries, and yet on the other side we've been able to come out successful. And when you look at climate, the impact on our climate now, it's still in an indirect way where larger countries are responsible for the bulk of the impact on the environment, and here are very small populations that deal with the negative end results. So I think there needs to be more responsibility on larger countries, not just whether we're associated through a constitutional relationship, but there should be mandates for you to pay into funding to assist smaller nations when it comes to fighting climate resilience. And then I talk about the region. We have to leverage these partnerships, and I think Nevis is a perfect example of that, where you look around you, and I don't have to be a subject matter or a climate expert to know, when I look around and see all this green and biodiversity, there's no way an island like this contributes more to a carbon footprint than they do in terms of absorbing and contributing to the renewing factors of this planet. And then on top of that, now they're tapping into geothermal energy. So where is the benefit, the global benefit for Nevis for the impact, the positive impact they're having on the region and the world? And then to bring it all home and domestic, that's our responsibility as legislatures and policymakers. When we take a legal approach, whether it's through regulation or revenue generation, whether we tax investors that come into our countries and set up this large infrastructure that has a negative impact on our environment for economic reasons, of course, or we go a regulatory route and we set up measures or policies in place that make it difficult to take the routes that are less advantageous to our environment. So I really think that as overseas territories, we have to take, or as Caribbean countries, we really have to take a multi-pronged approach. We have to look at it from global access to financing, regional access to resources, and domestic legislature and policymaking.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of our panelists for this session. And we're going now for a quick 10 minutes bathroom break. Please be back at 12 so we can continue the conference. Thank you.